Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's CITI program webinar. Today's topic is cost allowability on federally sponsored projects, and it is presented by Katie Watkins and Jeff Ritchie. Just a quick few notes. This webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be available on the CITI program's website. This webinar is also for educational purposes only, and it is not designed to provide legal advice or legal guidance. You should consult with your organization's attorneys if you have questions or concerns about the relevant laws and regulations that may be discussed in this webinar. In addition, the views expressed in the webinar are solely those of the presenters. Now let me tell you about today's presenters. Jeff Ritchie is the founding director of the Office of Sponsored Programs at Hamilton College. He has 30 years experience in university-sponsored research and government contracting. He is also a member of Ankura and a former chair of the Research Administrators Certificate Council. Katie Watkins is a research administrator with over 30 years experience as well in the administration and management of university pre- and post-award services. She holds a master's degree in adult learning and development. Katie is a certified research administrator and a certified financial research administrator.
Our webinar today has some specific learning objectives. Number one, to determine the allowability of costs to federally sponsored projects. Number two, recognizing, and this, I can't tell you how important this is, recognizing the importance of context when determining cost allowability. And we'll focus on that quite extensively as we go through the presentation. Identifying typically unallowable costs, knowing that it always depends. And then distinguishing areas of risk associated with unallowable costs. And Jeff will actually speak a lot about that. So I'm going to be taking the first part of the webinar, and then Jeff will come in a little bit later with some case studies. So what are the factors that affect the allowability of costs? And this may be research administration 101 for some of you, but it really, you really should take a second look at this because it's very important. Allowability is the umbrella term. So what falls after that, so allocability and reasonableness and consistency, those all roll up into the allowability part of what we used to call cost accounting standards, and we may still actually refer to them as cost accounting standards. So as for allowability, looking at the cost principles in 2 CFR 200 subpart E, is that cost or that proposed cost, is it noted as allowable? And if it is, or if it isn't, look at the context. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Look at the award terms and conditions to determine allowability. Your own policies and procedures are also a factor because something that's allowable in uniform guidance may not be allowable within your own institution. And I cannot stress the importance of looking at your own policies and following your own policies. And if I can skip forward a little bit to 3.4, when we talk about consistency, not only are we talking about, costs that are incurred for the same purpose and in like circumstances, for example, always once a direct cost, always a direct cost. We're also looking at how you apply your own policies and procedures to the costs that come through on federally sponsored projects. So I can't stress enough how much your policies and procedures are, just so important to the big picture. Allocability. Can you with certainty say that this cost has benefited this award or these awards to a certain degree? So you may have a cost that benefits more than one award. In what percentage can you, indicate with certainty that the cost has, benefited that award? So that's
okay. Well, hi everybody. Now this slide should be pretty readily recognizable to most of you, pretty familiar. I mean, these are the building blocks of most of our budgets. Salaries and wages and benefits, graduate tuition that Katie had just referenced, travel, subawards, consultants, material supplies, equipment, and the ever popular other direct costs. So, these are all the essential building blocks. If you go online, you can find any number of Excel templates that will assist you in building your budget. And of course, you can make your own if that's what you prefer. But the important thing to remember is with different federal programs, and in particular, if you're dealing with non-federal sponsors, any one of these things might not be an allowable cost under their guidelines. So you really do have to read that funding opportunity announcement, and I'd recommend reading it twice. There's an old joke about a hiker who's out, and he comes across a park ranger, and the hiker asks, I've been seeing all these mushrooms out here. Now which ones are the edible ones? And the park ranger says, well, all of them. Some of them only once. And the point to remember here is that even these generally allowable costs, if they're not handled correctly and reported correctly, can become unallowable costs. But before we get to that, we'll talk about some of the generally unallowable costs. Now, if you've been doing this for a while, you probably know that some of the things that are typically unallowable, some of them can be allowable costs under the right circumstances. Advertising, if your institution is advertising, places an advertisement seeking participants for a research project. If you are recruiting, a postdoc researcher, those can be allowable costs. Alcohol, the most obvious one. If you are doing research on impairment of motor skills after consuming alcohol, well, somebody's got to consume that alcohol, and somebody's got to buy it. Now some of these are, I think, I can't even come up with a far-fetched scenario where lobbying costs would be.
Cost allowability is always subjective, with very, very few kind of exceptions. Somebody asked me in the questions about a sponsored projects person who was 50% in the sponsored projects office and possibly 50% as a PI on another project. And that would be allowable if there were no conflict of interest between their role in the sponsored projects office and their role as the PI on a sponsored project. And what I said is that some type of MOU should be written to ensure that those roles are delineated appropriately. So there you go. The question brought up an exception. Always take the context into consideration. Record keeping I talked about, so I don't want to go over that again. Always go first. The source document you go to initially is always going to be 2 CFR 200. Work your way down from there. You can always be more stringent than 2 CFR 200, but not less stringent. And remember that's really important. And then when in doubt, don't be afraid to pick up the phone, or actually email is even better, and contact the grants management officer. If your PI won't do it, then, you do it. But when in doubt, ask.
We invite everyone to review our content offerings regularly as we continually add new courses and webinars in various areas of technology, higher ed, research, ethics, compliance, and professional development. In particular, our audience members today may find the effort reporting, compensation reporting course, essentials of research administration course, and our grant proposal and protocol development offerings of interest.